The social media world lit up recently when a video with racist overtones was posted by the White House, and leaders and influencers from all around the country rushed to join the dialogue and pile on to the madness that followed. But if we take a deep breath and we take a step back, the question is, what lessons can we learn from this? How can we grow from this in our lives and in our leadership? How might we be able to handle things differently and better moving forward? Welcome to the Matt Ware Show, a podcast for leaders who want more and won't settle for less. Straight talk to help you lead better, live bolder, and not lose yourself in the process. If you're serious about going to the next level in life and leadership, you're in the right place. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Matt Ware Show. I'm just going to dive right in and talk about something that has dominated social media headlines and comments and conversations over this past weekend as of the date of this recording. And that is the video that was posted from President Trump's social media profiles that in part depicted President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle as apes. You know, their faces superimposed on the bodies of apes, which of course many people found very racist, highly inappropriate, hugely disappointing that would come out from a sitting president, and rightly so. Okay, let's just get that out there right from the beginning of this conversation. Racism in any form, in all of its forms, is wrong and should be rejected and denounced, period. Full stop. However, because of my bent, my gift toward leadership, I see this situation not really through the perspective of racism, although I certainly understand why people do see it that way, and I'm not discounting that at all. But what I did is I zoomed out and saw this whole thing from the perspective of leadership, not only for President Trump, although I think there are some leadership, takeaways that we can learn there, but also for so many other leaders who jumped in on the national conversation about this. And because I happen to be a person of faith, I have a background as a pastor, spent many years in church and ministry context, I was particularly interested to see how people of faith, people who would be, what I would consider kind of values-driven people have responded to it and have handled it. So today maybe is a little bit different of an episode because I want to talk about the lessons that we can learn and glean from this situation that's happening, in current events right now that, of course, we can apply out to other contexts as well. Good leadership always works, and it's not confined to one time or place or culture or situation. Leadership that is built on timeless truths, built on solid principles, will always work, will always be effective, will always yield good results. If a leadership principle is true, it's true for every kind of leadership. And so I want to offer some observations on leadership lessons that I'm seeing, through this situation. And again, this is only a few days old as of the date that I'm sitting down to record this. So it's still fresh and more information could emerge. So this may not be a complete picture yet. What we know about it is still maybe evolving. So keep that in mind if by the time, you're watching or listening, some of the facts have changed. We're going to take that into consideration. But as of right now, as of today, here are some lessons, takeaways that I have that I think really are timeless, really are universal and applicable in every leadership situation. Particularly ones like this that are controversial, that are emotionally charged, that are politically divisive. Maybe in some ways this even applies to sort of crisis leadership kinds of situations. And these are not in any particular order. This is just, kind of my thoughts. I'm just sort of, verbal processing this and downloading some of this. And so I hope it's helpful for you as you're thinking through it, because no doubt you've seen it and followed along as well. So here are a few thoughts. Number one is this. Leaders must take responsibility, period. Leaders must take responsibility. It is incumbent upon a leader to take responsibility, not just for themselves, but for their team and for their organization. They have to own it. They have to take it. If what was done or what was said came from their organization, their company, their team, their brand, it doesn't really matter if it was them personally. They have to take full responsibility, or as Jocko Willink would say, extreme ownership. And this one is directed at President Trump. President Trump, if you're listening, appreciate you, but here's something you need to know. There are conflicting reports, obviously, about what happened with the video. Was it edited or spliced or screenshot? And there was another audio, video that auto played after it. I don't know. It's hard to know if we're getting the full story or all the facts there. Here's what I do know. It was ridiculous that President Trump just didn't take responsibility for it. When he's asked point blank, he just said, no, I didn't make a mistake, which in the purest sense is probably true. I mean, it's not like he's editing and posting these videos himself. I mean, Trump is not, sitting on his phone with CapCut, making his own videos. But somebody on his team made a mistake, a really big one. Somebody in his organization, in his office, representing his brand and the institution of the presidency itself made a mistake. And as the leader, he needs to own that. Leadership often means that you get more credit than you deserve when things go well, and you get more blame than you deserve when things go poorly. That's just an institutional reality. And if you can't handle both ends of the spectrum well, if you can't take either the compliment or the criticism and right-size them in your mind and in your heart, you will struggle as a leader. And while I like a lot of what President Trump does as a leader, this is one that bothers me. He really likes to take credit, and he really doesn't like to take blame. And guess what? Leaders have to do both. You've got to take both. You don't just get to be the hero. Okay, when you are a leader, you put yourself in a position where you shoulder the blame of the people who serve underneath you. You ultimately own their mistakes. You take on their failures because they represent you. Sometimes you're going to have to fall on your sword when they screw up. Which leads me to my second takeaway, that leaders must know when and how to apologize. We have to know when and how to apologize. Honestly, it kind of just blows my mind that Trump didn't just apologize for it. Like, okay, we get it. You didn't personally edit the video and post it. Fine. But how hard is it to say, I'm so sorry this happened. This should have never happened. I apologize for how this affected President and Mrs. Obama because while we may differ politically, I still want to treat people with respect, even if we wildly disagree. The staffer who was directly responsible is being dealt with, but because I'm the president, I'm ultimately responsible for everything that comes out of this office, and I'm sorry that this was put out because it does not represent me and it does not represent the dignity of this presidency. Boom. Okay, that it took 15 or 20 seconds, right? I mean, this is not that hard. Too many people think that they will lose credibility if they apologize. What you have to understand is that you actually gain credibility when you apologize. People respect you more when you own it than when you avoid it. They'll respect you more when you say, I'm sorry, than when you say, it's not my fault. Shirking blame will lose credibility, but taking blame and apologizing will gain credibility. Taking full responsibility for everything that's happening in your life and your leadership does not make you weak. It makes you wise. Man, if Trump just comes out and apologizes, this whole thing goes away. It blows over. And big picture, people would have respected him even more. And they may never like him. They may never agree with him. I get that. But they would at least respect that he owned it and apologized for it. The third observation or takeaway from this is that leaders must know how to de-escalate. Leaders must know how to de-escalate. And I'm going to aim this observation not at President Trump, although I certainly think it would apply to him. I'm aiming this at so many other leaders, influencers, particularly on the conservative, Christian, faith-based, values-driven side of things, because that's my tribe. Okay, this is the people that I know. This is the world that I live in, who I saw so quickly jump into the fray on this issue. And what I observed is that emotion got the better of so many people. They got fired up, which isn't bad. I mean, I'm a big proponent of passion. You know that. I love seeing passion in leaders. But too many leaders let their feelings get ahead of the facts in an emotionally charged situation. And when that happens, the way they handle it, the way they communicated about it can sometimes become very unhealthy and unhelpful. And I watched a lot of leaders just pile on about this. And some of it was from their own deep sense of conviction or personal experience, with racism and these kinds of issues. And so I understand that. But honestly, for a lot of them, I think this was just an easy way to feel like they could take a stand on something that everybody would agree with. right? I mean, nobody's going to disagree when you make this big stand about racism. And so they had the opportunity at no risk to look like a moral crusader. And I posted some thoughts about that the other day. I'm not going to unpack all of that here in this episode. But my point is this. Leaders have to know how to de-escalate tense situations. Every leader carries two buckets, a bucket of water and a bucket of gasoline. And when they come up on a fire, they have to be very careful which bucket they pour from. One bucket is going to put the fire out and the other is going to make everything explode. And it is imperative for people, and especially for leaders, to develop the discernment to know which bucket to use. I watched a lot of leaders make things worse, at least from my perspective, by their inflammatory comments, the accusations that were painting with a really broad brush. And so it was just really telling to me that so many leaders have not learned the art of de-escalation. And really, it's like they don't understand that leadership is influence, right? I mean, the John Maxwell 101, leadership is influence. They didn't seem to understand that they had influence, and their influence could either stir people up or calm people down. And what I saw is that this was not handled well in a lot of the online conversations that were happening. Another observation, I guess it's number 4, these are, again, not in any particular order or priority, but just, kind of off the top of my head things. Leaders have to know how to separate actions from identity. Have to know how to separate actions from identity. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're raising kids, you learn very quickly when your kid does something you don't like, don't approve of, this is not who we are in this family, this is not what we do in this house. You have to separate their actions from their identity. Okay, we don't label the kid by what they did. If your kid lies to you, you don't suddenly start to say, well, Johnny's a liar. Right? You don't identify him that way. You don't label him that way because you don't want him to think of himself. You don't want him to take that identity on for himself. Okay? You separate what he did with who he is. Okay? He lied. That doesn't mean he's a liar. Okay? He took his sibling's toy, but that doesn't mean he's a thief. I know that sounds really simple and really obvious when we talk about raising kids, but what about when we talk about how to lead and influence other people? Could it be that we are too quick to label someone based on something they did rather than look deeper at who they actually are? And I'm not talking about being blind to obvious character deficits or excusing bad behavior. That's not what I'm saying. We absolutely need to be honest. We need to have a sober assessment about ongoing, persistent issues that we see. I think we need to acknowledge habits and recurring tendencies. We've got to get, especially if we're leaders, we've got to get really good at pattern recognition in people. But we also have to realize that a person can make a mistake, and that mistake is not necessarily a full and final indictment on their character. Look, the video that was posted was racist, right? I mean, nobody's arguing that. But to jump from a 2-second moment in a video with a dubious backstory in terms of how it got there and who posted it and whatever the editing issue was or whatever, to jump from that to Donald Trump is a racist, that's a really big jump. And when you actually look at his relationships over the years, when you look at his policies, you look at what he's done or is trying to do to improve the country, particularly in regard to economic policy and employment opportunities and all of that actually benefit minorities, it's really tough to say that Donald Trump as a person is a racist. Good leaders know how to separate a person's actions from their identity. They don't assume that one mistake or one moment is the full picture or the final conclusion. They don't automatically assume that what someone did is the whole story on who they are. And I saw way too many leaders jump immediately and automatically to conclusions. In this situation, they didn't seem to take Trump's track record into account. They didn't seem to recognize the sitting president of the United States is not just doing his own editing and posting. Okay, like give me a break. There's probably more to this story. There are more people involved. There's other stuff going on. And maybe, just maybe, we would want to be a little bit generous, a little bit charitable in our assumptions about other people, because guess what? We would want other people to be generous and charitable in their assumptions about us too. Good leaders know how to separate identity from action. The next one is that good leaders have to take the good with the bad. Good leaders must take the good with the bad. And this is true with both situations and with people. There's good and there's bad, and they're all lumped into one, right? No situation's perfect, and so you take the good with the bad. No person is perfect. You take the good with the bad. I believe that we are living in a dangerous time as a society where we're eliminating all of our heroes. We've come to believe that if someone does one thing that's bad, it erases everything they did that was good. If they have a vice, it erases all their virtues. And because of that, we can no longer have heroes because nobody is without fault or flaw. And we need heroes. We need people to look up to who inspire us and motivate us. And that doesn't mean we can't be honest about their shortcomings and their failures, but it means we can still aspire to be like them in the areas where they were great, and we can aspire to be better than them in the areas we see them as deficient. Society is not well served when we eliminate all our heroes. It's dangerous to idolize people and think everything they do is wonderful and ignore their flaws. It's also dangerous to demonize people and think everything they do is horrible and ignore all their virtues. We must have the ability, the maturity, the emotional intelligence to be nuanced in our views. We must be able to say, I agree with this, but I don't agree with that. I support this person, but I break with them on this position. We must be able to hold the good with the bad. Number 6, and I guess that'll be the last one for today. I could probably keep talking about this, but the last one for today is that leaders must think before they speak. We must think before we speak. And listen, I'm calling myself out on this one too, because I am guilty of this sometimes. And so all these observations that I'm making today, this is not me pointing fingers at someone else necessarily. I'm just sitting back and seeing all of this go down, and my brain is exploding with all of these, leadership lessons and life lessons that apply to me as much as they apply to anyone else. And I'm the first one to say, hey, I've posted stuff online without thinking about it too. I've spoken in a meeting without thinking about it too. So I'm right here with you on this. In this situation, I saw a lot of leaders make really big statements really fast in the heat of the moment. Before we knew all the facts. And honestly, I don't think they helped their cause or their credibility by doing so. They probably would have been better served by sitting on it, even just for a few more hours, calming down, seeing if there were some other, data points that they needed to look at that would give some shade to it, and just taking time to think before they speak. When it comes to leadership communication, speed is important, but tone and context and accuracy might be even more important. Being the first person to make a statement is not helpful if your statement lacks the right content or context. Leaders need to speak quickly, but they need to think before they speak. The Bible has an incredibly helpful piece of advice that we can apply to leadership communication. It says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And whether you're a person of faith or not, I think we can all agree that in both life and leadership, we would all be well served to do that, to be quicker to listen, slower to speak, and slower to get angry. We'd save ourselves a world of hurt and embarrassment and emotional damage if we just did those 3 simple things. All right. I know this is a little bit different of an episode. I'm just kind of sharing kind of raw thoughts, honestly, and observations on something that's happening in current events. But I think as people who really do want to grow, people who really want to go to the next level in life and in leadership, we've got to train ourselves to see these things, to interpret these things, to view the world through this lens. This has to be our perspective. This has to be our worldview, to always be thinking critically about what's happening and learning what we can apply in everyday situations, taking it all in and applying that to what's happening in the context that we get to serve and lead in. I think it makes us better if we do that. The greatest felt need in the world is leadership. And I believe we're seeing that now more than ever at every level. If we lean in to become better leaders, we can make a greater impact on people's lives and make a greater impact on the world around us because they need us now, and they need us to be better now more than ever before. If any of this today has helped you, or I don't know, triggered some thoughts, or fired you up, or I don't know, maybe you want to share your own perspective on the situation, drop me a comment, shoot me a DM. I'd love to hear from you. Share it with somebody that you think would benefit from it. And if you can rate or review it, that does help us reach more people like you. You can find me at themattware.com and at themattware on all the social channels. Until next time, go lead better and go live bolder.